Hello, my Bookhos. You may have thought Halloween was over, but it's not. I mean, like, it can be over for you, but like, I'm saying that it's not over for me. Hello, my Bookhos, and welcome to Bookhoarding with Bianca. I am Bianca, and today I'm going to talk to you about my witch's hat project that I've been working on. You see that I have one here, and I have one here. Has little ties and it's very cute. Today I'm going to be talking to you about my work through for this, and one big thing will be that this is less talking about tutorial for this and more talking about how I changed the pattern a bit to widen the inside of this one to fit my head a little bit better, because this was feeling a little precarious, if you will. I wanted to secure my hat, let's say that, on my head that feels a little bit more largish than maybe the pattern itself was accounting for. All right, so let's just jump into materials. For this, you're gonna need some fabric, some interfacing of some kind. I use actually a heavy buckram, and I use two kinds of buckram. For this one, I used an iron-in one, a heat seal one, and then for the other one, I used just a sew-in one. Didn't like it as much. But I say use what you have and what's comfortable for you. And then the other thing for this is that I did use contrasting lining to the outside. I used a little bit of grosgrain ribbon for my second one. I think actually for this one too. Yeah, for this one too. Hey, I forgot things. And the other thing is millinery stuff. So I do have millinery wire and the little clips to put the wire into. So millinery wire, I got the joiners and the millinery wire from Wawak actually. So you can see here it is covered in a little bit of, I think it's just like a basic rayon or polyester fabric or thread, because it's just kind of wrapped around it. So you're gonna want this, and then joiners are the things that you put the two edges of the millinery wire into, and you crimp it down and it holds it together. The millinery wire stuff is not necessary, but I'm just explaining to you what I use and why my hats are gonna look the way they do, because I used millinery wire and buckram. You will also want a pattern. Hello. I got my pattern for free from Ereniko Cosplay, and I will link in my description. And in this video that you're about to watch, you're going to see how I put this paper together and why it does look a little funky in terms of the drawn lines. Hence, it's because my printer sucks. Okay, so I think that is all the materials, so let's just jump into it. All right, so you're going to start by just printing out this pattern. You can see here my printer, even though I pay nice money for the cartridges, more than I paid for the printer, does not work well because printers are a scam in this day and age that we live in. But I could still see the lines enough to tape it together, you can see here, and add the more solid lines with pins that I have. Then here's ta-da, patterns. So I did make this twice, and I'm going to show you, this is the materials I used the first time, this cool little botanical IKEA material. And I did use a fusible buckram for the first go around. You can see here, this is the cutting of the buckram. So I wanted to show you, I guess, what fusible buckram looks like. I didn't use fusible for my second round, but you can see here that kind of almost metallic-y, shiny bit. That's the fusible part, that's the glue. So if you see there, you can see a little bit. That is what you're going to see for fusible buckram. And then I obviously used IKEA scraps from other projects for my first go around. You want to make sure that you iron your fabric, whatever you're choosing for the liner and for the outer. If you're using two different fabrics, make sure that you understand which is which, what you've cut out. You really are only cutting 4 pieces of that and then 2 pieces of the buckram or whatever stabilizer thing you're using. Me and my fancy Wawak rotary cutter, so smooth. So here are the hat rims for my second go around, which is made to be adjusted more to my head width. So you're going to cut that out normally, although you could add width if you want to. This is where I did change stuff to be for a wider head. So this is the actual cone part. So I just added about 2 inches to the bottom of that, knowing that like the last ½ inch would be the new seam allowance, that's the word. And then I used some of my curved rulers and stuff to add that. Now, I had an older buckram that was not a fusible kind of buckram, and I just, it needed some love because it had been kind of crumpled up. So I just rehydrated that with some of the starch and then ironed it a bunch. It's still a little wibbly wobbly, but here we are. So yeah, I added that width on the tube, so now there should be a little bit more, and I'm gonna just sew that edge together. And then I'm just gonna be cutting this way. So I'm sure there's better, you know, like for people who actually make hats, I'm sure that you have better ideas of how to make these bigger. Like I could have done a slash and spread where I just cut up the side of this and spread the pattern out so that it was wide all the way from the top down, but I chose just to add length to the witch's hat part that you can see here. So this is going to stand on its own, and so I'm just putting it on my head to kind of get an idea of like, does it fit? And it's like, yeah, it definitely fits. There's also a little bit too much, and so I made an unofficial measuring thing just to kind of keep tabs on what I was looking for of my head, of like, this is about where I want it to fit over my hair in this way. So I take my piece of ribbon, I put it around my head in the place that I want it to be. I left a little bit of seam allowance so I could sew it together. I also measured things to make it official. And then I sewed that together, and then I used that as a kind of base for helping me throughout the project, just knowing where to cut, where to keep things. So because of the way that like the seam sticks out, it's a little hard to get that exact, but you can see here, like obviously that would need to curve and not just be straight across to fit my head and be even, but I use that as a way to be like, okay, this is how far down this needs to go, and obviously then from that ribbon line I need seam allowance. So I have my handy little head ribbon seam allowance thing. I don't know if that makes sense, but it works. So then you take your outer fabric after you've cut the inner fabric stuff, the liner and the buckram, to be a better fit, I guess, for your head. And then I trimmed it and sewed it down. So this is a little bit different than the other directions that come with the pattern, because I'm just sewing it this as kind of one piece, and then I'll be using my ribbon to cover up the seam on the inside. And there's my handy little pin magnet situation. So then we're moving on to the witch's hat brim. Again, my poor fabrics got a little messed up, so I'm just starching these. I don't think you have to, but I wanted to starch these, especially the liner, because it was very, very flimsy, and I wanted it to have a little stability, at least as I'm sewing it, right? So that inside line, obviously my head's is a little bit bigger than that line now, right? Than the one that came on the pattern, because my head, I'm now going for a bigger hole. So I used the ribbon to kind of see how far I would need this to change. And so you're going to need two lines. So basically you're going to need to redraw where your actual head opening situation is, and then and half of an inch in from that you'll need another circle, which will be the seam allowance circle, right? So like, you can't just sew, or you can't just cut to your head line. You need the actual line for seam allowance. That makes sense. Headlines, I don't know. Here we are though. So I used my clear quilting ruler to give myself a kind of idea of what those lines would be. Now, if you use something sturdier, and so you know that your head is like a specific shape that's not just a circle that you're looking for, you can also use that to adjust and modify. So I cut out the smallest circle just to start with, and this will show you. So like I used the circle that came with the original pattern, but knowing that I'd like widened this to fit my head a little bit more. And so then what I'm doing here is I'm just going to try to pull it down and see how far that goes, and then I'm just going to cut around it, because I already need to cut into it all to make, you know, it actually fit my head. But this helps me kind of gauge how much more I need to go. I really also wanted to test this out because I didn't want to cut a second big chunk of my Morris fabric out, because I do have a limited amount of this reproduction fabric. So I was like, okay, cool, confirmed. Then I cut to my estimated seam allowance line for the next round, and you can see it does lay a lot flatter. It won't lay entirely flat because I need to have a seam allowance space, and I don't want to cut those inside edges just yet. But I did cut a couple places that did need a little evening up, a little bit more, I guess, truing, if you will, from the first time that I cut it. So I'm just doing, you can see little pieces there. Okay, so after I've trimmed that a little bit more, I then put this around my hat. And again, I'm doing a little at a time just because I want to double check that this doesn't go funky. I want this to fit, but I also don't want to have to recut this. And so it's laying the flattest yet, and it still has, when I pull that skirt up, it stops around where I need the seam allowance to stop. So I pin that inside out-ish. So basically it is right sides touching the brim stuff to the little hat part, and I sew that around. So once I had pinned that around, I realized it was the exact proper right fit. I think that the other thing I did too that I didn't really show was I did modify it so it wasn't just like a circle. I had it so it was a little bit more oval shape because of where I'm trying to get that to fit on my head. I'm going to slightly, I don't know, it seemed like that was more ovular. I don't know. Words are hard, man. So then here's this without the buckram brim in. Looking pretty good. It fits pretty good. This looks like a little like mushroom octopus hat without the stuff inside of it. So you can see there that it still needs the insides, the actual stiff part. So here's the liner and the buckram. So this was not a fusible buckram. I decided to quilt this. I don't know. I had worries about how this beautiful floral IKEA fabric would work, but I repeated the same steps to just get that to make sure it would fit okay. I cut into the middle circle until it fit, and then I sewed it down. I pinned and sewed, pinned and sewed. I don't think it's necessary at all to do the quilting. I just did it. It's a little bit more whimsical. I also, again, because it wasn't a fusible buckram, it was kind of another way that I was keeping those fabrics together. So then you want to cut those curves now that we're finally here to this spot. Cut those curves. You can trim them. I waited till later to trim them. So then you're going to work on your brim. So I just went around and ironed it, steamed it flat, and then I'm going around and I'm pinning all the layers to it themselves after I'm flattening them out. So I'm just looking all the layers, making sure the seam is turned in, having this lay how it will lay on my head, and pulling all that fabric out and then pinning around the entire hat. All right, so you can see here I've pinned just so that I have everything in place to where I know it will need to go, because I haven't trimmed the inside. It is a little flopsy, and also because I didn't put in any wire. So we're going to do that next. I got millinery wire, and I have those little like ceiling clips that I got from Wawak a while ago. And so what you're going to want to do first is just fold up along that inside edge. And so I basically unpin what I had and repin higher up from the edge, and then I fold over. So you can see here I fold the top over, and then I fold that under layer in, and then I pin it. And I want to have it's about 1/2 inch in, and I will be stitching right along the edge of that because this is basically making the tube for my wire to go through. That's how I'm using that. This is not proper millinery, but it is just the way that I did this. You're welcome. So yeah, you can see here just how everything looks. So you're just hand rolling that. You can also like use an iron. You can steam it to make it flatter, but as I hand sew, it kind of flattens out. So after you do the whole hat, you will want to go, and again, you're going to sew along that inside edge. And voila. And then you want to leave like 2 inches open so that you can start putting the millinery wire in. And this is how I got my hat to be stiff. I'd say my first attempt was the more successful one. I feel like attempt number 2 I did not do as well at, but it was the one I recorded. So here you go. Now I'm just going to start feeding the wire in through that 2-inch gap I left. And that's what I'm doing. And you'll kind of have to maneuver it, as you see here. Or as it's hard to see. But you'll have to like hold it and like sneak it in. And it's kind of like if you've ever added, like put a tie back into a hoodie or sweatpants. It's kind of like that. So you're just going to do a little bit of that, where you kind of let it gather one place, and then you hold the tip and you pull the gathered fabric down to the edge, and you just keep trying to feed the wire through very gently. If you really want the wire at the end not to snag on anything, you'll want to probably file it a little bit, so it makes it a little bit easier, a little bit smoother. But yeah, you pretty much just push a little bit from that side, push a little wire in, and try to just snake it down through the hat. Here you can see more of this workspace at work. So I'm just pushing it from where the coil is, and then it ends around here, and I'm just slowly pushing it more and more through. When you have as much as you want, when it kind of is standing the way that you want it to stand, you're going to cut it. So I think the best is when you push it out as far as possible. So it's as tight as possible, as taut as possible. It will give you a little bit of like a swag of like swagger. There's a little bit over one side. But yeah, so I cut that, and then I add one of these little tubes. I put one side of each of these into the tube, and that's how they're connected. And then I use a little I use like a little crimping tool and pliers to kind of shape that metal around the ends of the millinery wire. And that's how I did that. I should have put a little bit more, like maybe an inch more millinery wire in this. I was a little bit off because it was not as taut as it needed to be, and yeah, I'm a little bummed about that, but what are you gonna do? So then I'm just going to sew the outside to the inside, and using a little catch stitch, which is hard to see, but I'm just going to fold down a little bit of that top, and then just over under for the outside, that last seam that's over the wire. Okay, so then this is what was left of the inside seam after I had pinned it, and not pinned it, but after I'd clipped it, clipped the edges of that seam. And so now I'm using my initial thing that I used for my head, the little pink ribbon, and I'm just using scroll grain ribbon and covering that up. So I sewed around the outside of it, and then here's a bunny break, because oh my goodness, I'm so close to finally finishing this. Look at her, isn't she adorable? Little gremlin baby. And then I finished the inside. You can see there, I just sewed it to the inside, and we're done. Now, obviously, this is the finished product for number 1. So I added my little birthday floral crown that my in-laws got me. They told the florist to do something that was quote Pride and Prejudice-y, which I think the white bow and the like beautiful botanicals really pulled it together. I just dried it because I thought it was just like so fucking cute, and I think it actually really works dried. Yes. Now for this one, because it was the first time I made it, I did use a little of the seam allowance from my slightly larger heads. You can see here, the garland's actually just covering up a little bit of seam showing through because I just kind of had to join it on top of each other. And then the grosgrain ribbon covers up that spacing here, which is spacing that I correct for with round tool. Wow, I almost dropped a thing. You didn't even see that. Magic of cinema. So round tool. The bow, I think, just really brings it together, you know? So if you want to know how I put the bow in, actually, I'll pause here to talk about how I just put 2 buttonholes in. I use my largest button in my buttonhole maker, and I put 2 buttonholes in. And then I just threaded the ribbon, the grosgrain ribbon, through. It does look a little bit bonnet-like, right? So I think that like all this comes down to like where you're trying to fit this, how you want it to look. You can see here, I can kind of with the millinery wire a little afterwards and kind of get it to do some fun accents, if you will, dramatic things. But I think these worked out pretty nicely. Both of them are floral and both of them do their own thing, their own little color scheme. That one obviously already matches stuff that I have, and this one will hopefully soon match some things coming up in my sewing life. I like the ribbon though for the drama. I like it's a little bonnet situation. And I think this is just like a really easy, fun, free pattern to put together. I think for future improvements, I will add some fun things to this brim here, maybe some flowers, another garland, or maybe a sash in the contrast lining color, because it is pretty cute, but it just doesn't have the same attitude as this beautiful green one, right? Like, I swear it's that glue, the glued in buckram that just like has much snappier look to it. I hope this is fun and useful for other people who were like, I really like this pattern, but I'm worried about this fitting on my head. And I can definitely tell you that like expanding the pattern to fit my head was nice so that I didn't feel a little bit more self-conscious. Obviously too, it is all around where you're trying to get this to fit on your head. So just pay attention to that. Just be like a little bit more like I guess concerned with like how other hats feel on your head and where it feels comfortable for you and what your purposes are for the hat. Like having the kind of like balance on the back of my head, like a bonnet is a thing, but like fitting it down on my head where I know that wind's not gonna knock it off because I live in a very windy area. It's kind of nice. I would like to thank my patrons as ever. You help support me, you help encourage me, you keep me going and sharing things I'm learning in costume school, which is going to be a lot more things soon because I'm going to take a costume crafts class in the spring. So you don't want to miss that, right? If you want to check out my Patreon or send me a tip on coffee, the links are in my description. Also link to the supplies and the pattern are there as well. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining me and don't forget to make it so.